two mothers from North Yorkshire whose sons were killed in a fatal car crash say meeting the men responsible has helped them come to terms with the anger that they were feeling. George Turner and Mason Pearson from Thirsk were passengers in a car which was involved in a race on the A61 4 years ago. Now, through a process called Restorative Justice, Angela and Sarah have met the drivers in prison. I caught up with them.
I'm stood there looking at George in the back of the car. He wasn't moving, and deep down inside I knew he'd gone, but while he was still there was that little bit of hope.
Mason hadn't phoned me. He always phoned me, did Mason, over the slightest thing. We could hear the air ambulance and all the sirens going, so we knew it was pretty bad.
Two mothers at the scene of a crash where their sons were killed. In March 2018, George and Mason had gone to meet friends in Thirsk. The 17-year-olds got into the back of a car to go to McDonald's. When the driver started racing another vehicle on the A61, it ended in tragedy. Angela was initially told her son had survived.
And I said, how do you know Mason's okay? I need to be with my son. And he said, his identification, Mason's fine, he's alive.
The fire service turned the machinery off. He just threw a blanket over his head. And so that was the moment I knew that he'd gone. Yeah.
As mums, I have, no idea how you get through that or how you deal with that. But one way you have dealt with it is through restorative justice, haven't you? Tell me about that.
Leading up to the trial, we had to keep quiet, so then to be told, you can say whatever you want to say.
We were empowered, I think, weren't we? We had the chance to be able to ask the questions. I mean, some of the questions we wanted answering were of no significance to the inquiry, were they? I put a picture of George in front of him, I put a picture of Mason, and I said, do you think you've served long enough? 4 months, 2 months for George, 2 months for Mason. To which he replied, yeah, I do, because it's boring in here. There's nothing to do.
Were you expecting there to be an apology? Were you expecting remorse?
They could tell me they were sorry till they were blue in the face. It's irrelevant. It was the fact that we got to tell them what they'd done to us.
Some people may find it hard to imagine that you would want to sit in the same room as the people responsible. Why did you want to do that?
Some people maybe won't understand this, but as mothers, we needed to know every minute of what happened that night to our sons.
Did that help in some way?
I wouldn't exactly say help us get over it. No, it will never heal. I suppose maybe to dampen some of the anger or the mixed emotions we were feeling, of not being able to have a voice. It helped that.
As a result of the restorative justice process, you then found the confidence, didn't you, to go to the emergency services yourself and talk to them about how things had been handled that night?
They apologised. I mean, it doesn't take away any of the pain and the hurt it caused us, but if it helps another family like us, then feel like we've done our bit.
Well, we contacted the emergency services about the story. In response, North Yorkshire Police gave us the following statement. They said, we're sorry that the level of support we provided fell short and for any additional distress that was caused. And North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service said we strive to learn where we can to make improvements in our response to incidents. Our thoughts remain with those affected by this tragic event. Well, Dave Pascoe helped Angela and Sarah through the whole restorative justice process. I asked him why it was so valuable for them to go through it.
I think initially they were extremely angry that they hadn't had a voice within the court process. I appreciate within the judicial system there's victim personal statements, but the likelihood of that statement being read out in its entirety is often quite slim. So I think this process allowed the mums to both have a voice and say the impact of how this particular crime had affected them.
Some people might struggle to understand why, as moms, they'd want to put themselves through this.
There is always answers that the police and the judicial system can't perhaps give to victims of crime. And if those answers are quite pressing, I think you would want to go through this process in order to get that closure, in order to get the answers to those questions, so you can then move on with a different process in mind that, yeah, I've now done everything I possibly can to get closure and have done the best I can for my boys.
And as we've just heard, it's not just about meeting perpetrators, but emergency services too.
I mean, sometimes the emergency workers do certain things at the scene of an incident, and if the family of a deceased person attends that scene, it can be quite traumatic. You sit down in the room and explain the impact of that particular situation to the workers or to the senior officers within that service, and have an explanation put back to them, and that assurance that perhaps we could change some things as well is really, really supportive.
You're watching Tuesday's Look